Hey guys, it's Warners. This is my final video going over the Barbarian in my game design series. I made a video going over the base Barbarian class and all 4 of the subclasses currently available in the 2024 rules. And basically in this video, I'm going to summarize the problems we found in the base class and the subclasses. And then I'm going to show you my fixes for both the base class as well as all 4 subclasses. And this is the first class we've done this with, but I'm planning on doing it for all 13 base classes and their subclasses. If this is your first video in the series and you want a more in-depth breakdown of the base class and the subclasses, go ahead and click the link in the cards. So first of all, this is the base Barbarian class. This is without subclasses considered. I'm thinking about changing how I talk about the class rating because there's meant to be room to add things for subclasses anyway with class design. So I want you to look at the more negative numbers as things that subclasses are meant to fill in. There can be a bit of a balance where base classes could include some of the improvements, and I am going to be making some small changes to the base class, but they're fairly minimal, and most of this will be taken care of by the subclasses. One thing to keep in mind about how I'm scoring everything is my goal isn't to get every class at 100. It's more to get every class to at least 95. And what I mean by that is barbarians will always have a gap in utility for the most part, so I more want to focus on everything else. But that does mean that subclasses that have more utility, I'm a little more free to add extra utility options, especially if I lower the damage a bit. And you'll see what I mean, especially when I start talking about the Wildheart Barbarian. So yeah, gaps are good in base classes for subclasses to fill. Also, I want to remind people what the goal of a Barbarian is. A Barbarian is a melee fighting martial class. So them being very resilient, them doing a lot of damage, and them being a good tank are a few of the desires that we have for the design goals of a barbarian. And what we have agreed upon is that in the later tiers, barbarians start to struggle with damage a little bit. And so one of the main goals we're going to have is to fix that and also just kind of clean up some abilities and get rid of any feel bad abilities, because the 5.5e barbarian is very improved from the 5e barbarian, but they added some feel bad mechanics that could definitely be improved. So anyway, let's get into the base class changes. So first of all, we have the official base class features table, and if you look at rage damage, it starts at +2. At level 9 it goes to +3, and then at level 16 it goes to +4, and then it doesn't go up anymore after that. I've decided that I wanted to raise rage damage, but I didn't want to raise it too much, especially because we're going to be changing brutal strike at level 9 a bit. So the first change I'm going to make is all I'm going to do is, instead of going from +3 to +4 at level 16, we're going to go from +3 to +5. It's a very small change, and I want to make the changes very small. So yeah, that's all we're doing for the class features table. And you can see I have that written right up top here. And then brutal strike. This is the only other change I'm making to the base class, but it does a lot for the whole class and the subclasses. So brutal strike is one of those abilities that I really like, and I've always liked it, and I honestly didn't really see many problems with it until I started talking about it with other people. I think this is an important thing to talk about in design that I think some designers miss, and I've missed in the past myself. Even if an ability is good on paper, that doesn't mean it feels good. And brutal strike is one of those abilities that is good on paper but doesn't feel good. And the main reason why is you are given an ability that you have to sacrifice something to use. Yes, it's resourceless, and that's part of the reason why they designed it that way. But I think something to think about is, for example, a fighter's 3rd and 4th attack. Those are abilities that they don't have to sacrifice anything for. They just get to use them. And I can say this basically about any class's abilities. So I made a very simple change to brutal strike. I have the regular version up top, then in red are the changes I made. It now reads, once per turn, you can deal an extra 1d10 damage to one creature you hit if you use reckless attack on that attack roll. The extra damage type is the same as the weapon or unarmed strike used for the attack. When you deal this extra damage, you can also cause one brutal strike effect of your choice. You have the following effect options. So now barbarians at level 9, they can just use brutal strike every turn, doesn't cost anything. Get to add that 1d10 damage and you get to pick one of the effects. I think this is a super clean change. It actually lowers the word count. It's simpler to use and it just feels nice. So yeah, that's my base class changes. This has ripple effects into the subclasses, and so let's go over that. If you guys are liking my design changes to the barbarian, then consider checking out my newly released today duelist fighter subclass. You get a movement speed boost, different techniques you can use with your attacks. You eventually get a really effective reaction ability to reduce damage and then counterattack. You also get the ability later on to double your movement when you action surge and gain an extra attack when you use second wind. Finally, you're able to add even more effects to your techniques, and eventually you never provoke opportunity attacks to become the ultimate skirmisher. So consider checking it out. So if you want to check out my Berserker breakdown video, I have it up in the cards, but I would say the Berserker is almost completely fixed with the base class changes, where the damage starts to stagnate a bit, even for the Berserker in tier 4. Now at level 16, they're going to be getting an extra d6 plus 1 to their damage, with that rage damage bonus being a +5 instead of a +4, and with brutal strike being an ability they can use every turn. That will obviously be adding a lot of damage, and they don't have to sacrifice advantage. And the only other change I really wanted to make for Berserker was their intimidating presence. I feel like you should be able to activate it when you activate your rage. So I changed the beginning line when you activate your rage, or as a bonus action while your rage is active, and then the intimidating presence ability. So yeah, this one was probably the easiest one to fix, and I think that really helps its action economy and synergy with the rest of the kit, and it's very thematic to start combat with raging and intimidating everyone. That's it for the Berserker. Pretty simple. Now the Wild Heart, I made a lot of changes because in my opinion the Wild Heart needed the most changes. So here at level 3, Animal Speaker, it is mostly meant to be a ribbon ability, but I think even as a ribbon ability it was lacking. And Beast Sense is such a bad spell that I just got rid of it and replaced it with Find Familiar. So now this barbarian has access to Find Familiar. I also changed the name of the ability to Friend of the Wilds. And then also when you cast Speak with Animals, the spell's duration becomes 8 hours for that casting. That way you can just cast it in the morning and then you always have the ability to speak with animals. Why not? It's pretty niche anyway, and this is the like nature focused barbarian, so why not let them talk to animals all the time, you know? And then I decided, you know what? I feel like this barbarian needs proficiency in animal handling, and if they already picked animal handling proficiency, then they get expertise in it. It's also a pretty niche skill, and I feel like this barbarian should be good at it, so there you go. Their second level 3 ability, Rage of the Wilds, completely unchanged. Then level 6, they gain this ability Aspect of the Wilds, and I made a very small simple change with this. All of these benefits are very minor, so I just gave this barbarian all 3 benefits and they're just active at all times. It makes the ability simpler, and I feel like they added options just because the class has options as kind of a theme in the class, and I feel like that was very unnecessary. And then I decided to make the dark vision of Owl just a bit farther at 90 feet, just so it feels a little more special. And then level 10, this is the big change. So Wild Heart is one of the few barbarians that doesn't get any damage boosts, and a lot of their abilities are very utility or out of combat focused. So I decided to just completely get rid of Nature Speaker and instead give them this new ability called Wrath of the Wilds. This also makes the naming scheme of all of their abilities have of the wilds at the end. They already have 3 abilities like that, so I decided to just make all of them that. Now the Wild Heart Barbarian, once per turn, when you use Brutal Strike, you can use Brutal Strike again on a second attack you make on the same turn against a different creature. So yeah, this basically allows you to do extra damage, but you have to kind of spread it out a bit, which plays well with a lot of the options already available to the Wild Heart Barbarian. For example, the Eagle option lets them bonus action dash and disengage. So if they have to go a bit farther to attack someone, they can do that a lot easier than other barbarians. So yeah, very simple, but very nice option. And then level 14 is completely the same. All right, World Tree, I actually made a decent amount of changes. First of all, overall, Vitality of the Tree I think is a good ability, but it feels kind of lacking for it being the only level 3 ability for this Barbarian. And similar to the Wild Heart, this is a Barbarian subclass that doesn't add any extra damage. It makes sense though because they have a lot of other really cool abilities, so I added a slightly less powerful damage boost here, but I felt like Life-Giving Force had a very small range and it made it hard to actually give out those temporary hit points to your allies. And then having to roll dice seemed kind of unnecessary and overly complicated for no reason. So what I ended up doing is when you activate your rage, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your Barbarian level. That's the same, but then now at the start of each of your turns while your rage is active, you choose another creature within 15 feet of yourself instead of 10 feet to gain temporary hit points. And then instead of rolling dice, it is equal to half your Barbarian level rounded up. And that's just so it's a lot simpler. And because I'm buffing the subclass in other ways, I wanted to kind of also make these temporary hit points a little less powerful. And then I added a second third level ability called Branches of the Tree. During your turn, your reach is 5 feet greater with any melee weapon that has the heavy or versatile property. So this is basically the level 10 feature, but instead of 10 feet, it's 5 feet. I decided that giving this to the World Tree Barbarian a little bit early makes you feel like a World Tree Barbarian sooner, and it's a nice little boost. And then I added, while you have temporary hit points from any source, the first creature you hit with a weapon or an unarmed strike takes extra damage equal to half your Barbarian level rounded up. The damage has the same type as the weapon or unarmed strike you use for the attack. So now you can add extra damage to your attacks, and it's by the same amount that you're giving temporary hit points. Makes it very simple, and then this motivates you to maintain your temporary hit points. It also adds possible builds where you can try to have secondary abilities that give you temporary hit points to sort of build upon. And I think that's fun to kind of leave that leeway in there for player creativity. Also, if you lose all your temporary hit points, you can always just activate Rage again, and especially at later levels, that will become more viable. And the World Tree Barbarian doesn't have any alternative uses for Rage anyway, so this kind of motivates you to do that when it comes up. I thought about changing Life-Giving Force to be able to work on any creature, so the Barbarian could give themselves temporary hit points with Life-Giving Force, but I thought that might be a little too powerful, so let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Then level 10, I basically just changed the wording of Battering Roots because they already have a 5-foot reach, and this is just explaining that this ability now extends it to 5 more feet, making it 10 feet, which is the original benefit the ability gave you. So yeah, that's the World Tree changes. Pretty simple, pretty nice though. And then we have the Zealot Barbarian. This is pretty similar to the Berserker Barbarian, where the base class changes I made fix most of the problems with the Zealot. And so the only change I made was I decided that Zealous Presence, when you activate your rage or as a bonus action, I decided with Zealous Presence that similar to the Berserker's Fear ability, it should be able to be activated when you activate your rage. So yeah, instead of it just being a bonus action, you now can activate it when you activate your rage. And that's it for the Zealot. So yeah, that's my changes. What do you guys think about them? And if you want these available in PDF form, I'll have them available on my Patreon. And consider subscribing because next I'm going to be going over the Bard and all the Bard subclasses. So if that sounds interesting to you, then also make sure to ring the bell to get notifications when I post more content. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.